real, because keeping it real is such a bore. If keeping it real makes me sound like you, then what would I want to keep it real for?
There's two things in particular which are really difficult to do in role-playing games: horror and comedy. I've talked quite a bit about horror before, so let's talk about comedy games. So try and think of comedy RPGs. Paranoia, obviously. Then it starts to get tricky, doesn't it? There's Toon, if you count that as a comedy game. There's Tales of the Floating Vagabond, a little bit more obscure, some people remember that. And then you kind of run out of steam, really. So why is that? I mean, after all, we have a lot of fun and laughs and stuff when we're playing games, so surely, you know, writing a comedy game shouldn't be that difficult if we're already predisposed to do that. But the comedy that occurs within games that we're already playing is quoting Monty Python or the absurdity of things that just happen to pop up. You're not setting out to be comedic, you're just having a laugh with your friends. When you're setting out to be comedic, it's a hell of a lot more difficult. Computer games don't have so much of an issue being comedic. So why is this? Why is comedy so hard to transfer into the tabletop gaming realm? And I think if you consider what the difference is, a lot of the things that are strengths for tabletop gaming in other regards are weaknesses compared to these other kinds of games when it comes to comedy. You know, comedy requires kind of the setup, you know, the pitch and the hit, so to speak. You know, so you got the joke set up, you got the straight man, and so on. So stand-up comedians work because they're in full control of the situation. Sitcoms work because they're in full control of the situation. Whereas a tabletop game is not set up and not controlled to that degree, not the same way that computer games are. It's much more like a freeform comedy, like Whose Line Is It Anyway? You know, you never quite know what anyone's going to do. And when it hits, it's great. But a lot of the time it doesn't quite hit. And you know, you're not professionals around the table, you know, who really understand comedy in the way that a lot of the people that ended up on Whose Line were. So I think that's the problem. The thing that's a strength for gaming in other terms, you know, the ability to be free and to do anything, really works for those other things, but in comedy it counts against you. So if we understand that, then it's possible to understand why Paranoia works so well, why it is the gold standard of comedy role-playing games. And that's because it's very structured. You know, you have the situation in a society that is very starkly controlled. You've got a whole stock set of jokes. You've got the clones so that you can make mistakes and your characters can die easily, and that's not a problem. You know, you can die for a joke and it's worthwhile. You've got the whole setup. You know, you the troubleshooters. You have the authority, but you're all paranoid of each other, so it encourages that cross-play and interplay. You've got the structure of the adventures follow a very kind of set pattern. It's quite a control. While it seems anarchic, it's actually very controlled, and you create that expectation of stupidity and problems that goes on. You know, you've got your call to the briefing, you get told what to do, there's all kinds of stupid problems will get in the way, you have to go and get your equipment, you have to go in R&D where you're given equipment that you have to use but which you know is stupid and is going to go wrong in some way. And so the whole thing is absurd and ridiculous from the start, but it's controlled. This happens, this happens, this happens, and it all makes some sort of structured sense that allows it to be funny because you have that kind of expectation building and waiting for that payoff. So when I created my probably most successful comedy game, Invaders, I definitely, unashamedly took those lessons from Paranoia and applied them to that game. I made it more structured so that you're alien invaders on missions for a largely disinterested and incompetent great leader. I put, you know, R&D weapons in there. I put stupid devices in there. I set it up in a mission format. I gave reasons for players to work against each other and just amped up the ridiculousness. Plus, it had a kind of familiar hook to people. The other main source of inspiration was Invader Zim, so you get the idea of the incompetent invader and the stupidity that goes around with that. But I definitely took my main cues structurally from Paranoia, because it works. It's a situation that works. It's the gold standard of comedy RPGs. It's the only one that consistently works, as far as I can see. Can you think of any other comedy games? I think I've covered the ones that most people know. Are there any indie comedy games that you can think of that work? Any one-off comedy scenarios that really worked for you? Let me know down in the comments, and we'll see how things go. Zang. If you like what I do here, please like, subscribe. You can find me on social media, on Twitter at Grimachu, James Desborough on Facebook, James Grim Desborough on G+. My main website is postmortemstudios.wordpress.com. If you want to help me out with a little money, which will go to support my games, writing and other projects, you can do so at Patreon, which is also Grimachu.